Hello, I'm continuing my reviews on the Godzilla series with Godzilla, Mothra and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All-Out Attack, which is a ridiculously long title. Most fans simply refer to it as GMK, and for simplicity's sake, that's how I'm going to be referring to it throughout this video. Now, GMK came out in 2001, and this is the 26th film in the Godzilla franchise, 25th if you don't count the 1998 American Godzilla. However, this movie does, oddly enough, kind of connect to that one. I'll explain that in a little bit. And this is the third film of what is known as the Millennium Godzilla series. The first two films in this series being Godzilla 2000 and Godzilla vs. Megaguirus. Now, with the exception of two movies, there really is no continuity between any of the Millennium Godzilla films. Basically, the Millennium series was meant to be an anthology series where each film was set in its own universe. And of all the Millennium Godzilla movies, this is the only one that actually utilizes the whole anthology concept, where it is a very fresh and unique take on the Godzilla mythos, and in a lot of ways, this is what the rest of the Millennium series should have been, and this is easily the best film of the Millennium Godzilla series. Now, GMK was co-written and directed by Shusuke Kaneko, who prior to this completely reinvented the Gamera franchise with his Gamera trilogy, which are easily the best films of the Gamera franchise, and with those movies he managed to make Gamera, a character who I always felt was the poor man's Godzilla, actually kind of badass. Now, GMK acts as a direct sequel to the original Godzilla, ignoring the continuity of all the films in between. So basically, in this movie's timeline, only the events of the original 1954 film have happened. However, there is a one-line reference in this movie to another giant monster that attacked New York City that the Americans have mistaken for being Godzilla, and it's obviously a reference to the 1998 film, kind of making that also in continuity with this, but if that's the case, that means the 1998 film is also in continuity with the 1954 film. But if that's the case, how come they never reference the events of the 1954 film in the 1998 film, and yes, I know I'm taking what was clearly meant as an in-joke way too freaking seriously. Now, this movie brings back Mothra, King Ghidorah, but also Baragon. Baragon is a character who first appeared in 1965's Frankenstein Conquers the World, but later got incorporated into the Godzilla franchise when he appeared in Destroy All Monsters. But since this film retcons the continuity of most of the franchise, in this film they give new origins for these characters, where in this movie King Ghidorah, Baragon, and Mothra are literally gods. Well, with Mothra, it doesn't really retcon her origin because she was already a deity even in the original series. But this movie really does have the feel of an Elseworlds story. Elseworlds was something that DC Comics used to do, where they would take familiar characters like Superman or Batman and put them in new settings and do radically different things with the characters. This really does feel like that, but for Godzilla. And in theory, that's what the whole Millennium series should have been, but I'm not going to dwell on that. Now, the plot of GMK is it's set 50 years after the events of the original film. Now, the original Godzilla ended where Godzilla was destroyed with the oxygen destroyer, but in this movie you find out that the Japanese government managed to cover that up and make it look like it was Japan's self-defense forces that killed Godzilla, as a way to bolster national pride, especially after Japan's humiliating defeat at the end of World War II. But the movie follows a young journalist named Yuri who works for this crappy low-budget TV station that specializes in these cheap mockumentaries about ghosts, but she desires to be taken more seriously as a journalist. But in the movie, she starts interviewing this seemingly crazy old man who claims that Godzilla is going to return to punish Japan for forgetting their imperialistic past. But he also claims that these three ancient gods called the Guardian Monsters, Baragon, Mothra, and King Ghidorah will rise up to try to defend Japan from Godzilla. But it turns out the old man was correct. In the film, Godzilla comes back from the dead, only now he's possessed by the vengeful spirits of all those killed by Japan during World War II. But the Guardian monsters do in fact come back to defend Japan from this ghostly incarnation of Godzilla, and the people of Japan are stuck in the middle as these monsters battle not just for their lives, but also for their souls as well. But the heart of the movie is definitely the relationship between Yuri and her father Taizo, who is an admiral for the JSDF. Their relationship in the movie is so warm and so sweet and so believable as well. It's honestly probably one of the most well-written human relationships you'll see in a Godzilla movie. And Yuri is a great character. She's very strong and very believable. Now, in the movie, Yuri was played by actress Chiharu Niiyama, if I'm saying her name right. Now, by the end of the film, Taizo is shown to really be the true hero of the movie. And he's probably one of the most badass human characters in a Godzilla movie. Now, Taizo was played by Ryudo Uzaki, another name I'm sure I'm not pronouncing properly. Now, in the movie you find out that Taizo survived Godzilla's first attack on Tokyo in 1954, and there's a scene where he's describing what happened to him in 1954, and it's actually a pretty powerful scene. And much like the original Godzilla, this is an example of the human story being just as important as all the stuff with the monsters. Another really interesting character is the old man who knows about the Guardian monsters. Now, this is a spoiler, but by the end of the film you find out that this guy was actually a ghost. Now, this character was played by Hideyo Amamoto, who was actually in several Godzilla movies prior to this, mainly in the Showa era, obviously as different characters, of course. Like, he played Ichiro's neighbor in Godzilla's Revenge. And the other human characters in this movie are really good as well. Like, Yuri's boss is hilarious. Some of her co-workers are also really fun characters. Now, actress Kaho Minami, yeah, I know I'm not saying her name right, but she has a small role in this movie. Now, this actress would actually go on to marry Ken Watanabe, who of course would go on to be in the 2014 American reboot of Godzilla. The movie also features cameo appearances from some actors and actresses who are also in Kaneko's Gamera films. Now, like a lot of Godzilla films, the special effects is kind of a mixture between good and bad. A lot of the practical effects and suitmation is very good, but some of the CGI in the film does not hold up well at all. Now, the kaiju battles in the film are of course fantastic, and you get an interesting role reversal with King Ghidorah, where King Ghidorah is actually portrayed as a good guy this time around, whereas he's usually portrayed as a villain. Now, apparently that's sort of a point of contention among a lot of Godzilla fans, but again, I basically look at this as sort of the Godzilla equivalent of an Elseworld story. I also love Godzilla's look in the movie. I love, like, the white eyes, basically making him look like a zombie, which, in a way, that's kind of what he's supposed to be in the movie, because this is supposed to be the Godzilla from the original film, literally come back from the dead. And fans have referred to Godzilla from this movie as Ghost Godzilla. Now, much like the original Godzilla, and much like 1984's The Return of Godzilla, there is a lot of political and social commentary in this movie. But whereas the original Godzilla was a metaphor for the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of World War II, and to a lesser extent the fire bombings of Tokyo, this movie is really making a statement about Japan's imperial past. Like, a lot of Godzilla movies are meant to be metaphors for what was done to Japan during World War II, but this movie is about what Japan did to other countries during the Second World War. Like, Japan committed a lot of war crimes during World War II. They were a very totalitarian and very imperialistic country, and the whole idea that Kaneko's going for with this movie is that Japan is trying to forget what they've done, forget their sinful past, past, and in this movie, Godzilla is a representation of the horrible things that Japan has done during the Second World War, and it's essentially punishing the people of Japan for trying to forget their crimes. And I thought it was a brilliant idea to have Godzilla possessed by the spirits of people killed by the Japanese during World War II. It's this whole idea of the sins of the father being visited upon the children, which in a lot of ways is exactly what happened with the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Because it really was the innocent who suffered the most in the atomic bombings of Japan for the crimes of their government and their military. But then again, in war, it really is the innocent who suffer. So the movie has a pretty deep message for a Godzilla movie, but that really shouldn't surprise anybody who's seen the original 1954 film, because Godzilla was always meant to be sort of the specter of World War II, only in this movie he's literally a specter. Now, while it is a film with a lot of deep political and social commentary and a lot of really good character drama, it's also a very funny film as well. There's a lot of humor in this movie. Now, in my old review of this film, I kind of criticized the humor, but looking at it now, the humor actually complements the drama and even the horror in the film. But also, I think a lot of the humor in this film was meant to be satirical. Like, there's a scene in this movie where Baragon is in the background, and this couple is like, let's run away, but first, take a picture of me with Baragon in the background, and it's such a silly scene, but I think it was meant to be. Like, I think it was meant to be satirical of how people kind of trivialize tragedies. Also, there's a scene in this movie where a guy is telling everybody to evacuate the supermarket because Godzilla is attacking, and this woman, who I can only call Japanese Karen, says, Godzilla is a legend. But it's like, wait a minute, in the universe of this film, Godzilla was shown to be something that actually happened years earlier, so why is this woman saying he's just a legend when this is something that actually happened in the universe of this film? But again, the scene was meant to be satirical. The whole point of the movie is that Japan was starting to forget their past. Also, Kawatani's score for the film is amazing. I would honestly rank it right alongside some of Akira Ifukube's tracks from the older Godzilla films. But yeah, Godzilla, Mothra and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All-Out Attack, or GMK, is an excellent Godzilla film. It's easily the best of the Millennium series, and one of the best Godzilla films, period. Like, this is definitely one of my top 10 favorite Godzilla sequels. And in a lot of ways, it's one of the best kaiju films in general. Now, before I end this video, I want to cut to a short review on this movie done by my friend Bill Burns, who is a college professor. Now, I did a 4-part retrospective on the Godzilla franchise with Bill years ago, and I tried to get him on board for this current series of Godzilla reviews, but he's been very busy lately, but I knew I had to get a short review from him for this particular one. But here are my friend Bill's thoughts on GMK.
Hi, everyone. Christian asked me oh so generously to talk a little bit about the 2001 film Godzilla, Mothra and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All-Out Attack, directed by Shusuke Kaneko. Of course, Kaneko had revamped and revitalized the Gamera series in the 90s, so I always thought that was a very inspired pairing of, Godzilla, this sort of icon, and the iconoclast Kaneko, who sort of, wasn't really beholden to the past. He had a great love for it, but he didn't feel, I think, that he needed to just regurgitate what had come before that, but really wanted to take characters, these sort of beloved characters, in different directions. Of course, this film was notable that Godzilla would be adversarial, right, while King Ghidorah would be a protector of the Earth and of human beings, which, again, might harken back a bit to the first Godzilla film, in which Godzilla was this sort of force of nature who really did not seem to have much connection or care for human beings. This, of course, is also reflected in the look of Godzilla, right? He has those sort of dead white eyes, which I thought were really sort of terrifying, because a lot of the Godzilla suits had rather more anthropomorphized eyes, to give him that more human-like sort of character. He was able to move his eyes. Some of the eyes, even in the sort of the early 70s films, were almost like doe eyes, so that one could sort of feel comfortable with looking Godzilla in the face with those wonderful eyes. The greatest thing I think about this film is, of course, the supernatural aspects of the film, the use of ghosts and spirits, which I don't believe had ever been used before in a Godzilla film. Godzilla films have been much more sort of science fiction, science, UFOs, nuclear physics, things like that. So when Kaneko used the supernatural aspect, I thought that was a really great direction to go into. Being a big horror fan, I really appreciated that. I also think there's sort of a metaphysical aspect to this film too, which you don't get in many Godzilla films. And this is reflected, of course, in the idea that the monsters themselves, the kaiju, are gods to human beings, right? And this is almost something out of Lovecraft, where humans are incapable of sort of understanding cosmic forces, these sort of forces that are larger than themselves. So they try to place these forces, these things that they don't understand, on a scale in which they feel comfortable with. So in that way, they're comfortable with the notion of a god or deities. So they see these monsters as those things. Whether they are or not, of course, is up to debate. The realism of the film, of course, is wonderful as well. Again, harkening back a little bit to the first Godzilla film. The deaths and destruction have real meaning in this film. There aren't just sort of meaningless set pieces, but rather, you really feel them. The one scene where you see the mushroom cloud in the distance when the kids and the teacher in the school, I think is just an amazing scene. Really sort of gets to the horror and the sheer fear of what the destruction would really mean. Also in the film, of course, there is a political commentary as well, right? The sort of World War II traumas that were sort of, is still very much part of the national character of Japan. But I think what Kaneko does really well in the film is that he not only sort of, shows what the effects, the consequences of the traumas inflicted on Japan in World War II by the Allies, right? Most notably through the atomic bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. But I think also he sort of also talks a little bit about or sort of displays the traumas that the Japanese inflicted on themselves, right, through their blind nationalism, right, not giving any thought to what their sort of imperialism was doing to other people like the Chinese and the Koreans and, obviously the United States when they bombed Pearl Harbor. So I thought that it was very even-keeled in the film. I think Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, the one from the Heisei series, was accused of being sort of jingoistic, propagandistic, only one side of the controversy. But I think that Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah does a good job of sort of showing how war and trauma sort of hurts everyone. Nobody really comes out a winner. In the end, this is one of my favorite Godzilla films. It's my favorite Millennium film, definitely. And I think that Kaneko should do more. I would love to see him do more Godzilla films, because I think he really brought some fresh ideas, fresh approaches, exciting approaches too, not just sort of cerebral, intellectual approaches, but also brought very sort of visceral, approaches to the character as well. And I think even you could see that that influence that he has, even in something like Shin Godzilla, which I think definitely it was influenced by Kaneko's work, not just with Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, but also with his Gamera films as well. So again, Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monster All-Out Attack, a wonderful film, one of my favorites, probably in my top 5 Godzilla films.
I hope you enjoyed Bill's take on this movie, and that was my review on GMK, and bye.